Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Question Time Live on the 15th of September. It's definitely a Tuesday because it's Question Time Live. I have a great panel. You'll see we have an extra member of our panel. Let me talk you through who that panel are. There are question opportunities for those of you out there. If you want to put those questions forward, please put them through the chat box, and I will endeavour to cover all of those questions in the next hour. We've got quite a few in already, so we've got enough to kick off, but don't be shy if there's something you want to know, whether it's about the legal side of what's going on at the moment, whether it's about the lobbying side of what APSCo are doing or what the government might be thinking of doing, or indeed about the business side from a big global player to a newer niche business, then do get those questions forward. Let me introduce my panel. I'd like to welcome, actually, Richard Harris, who is the Chief Legal Officer of Robert Waters. Most of you will recognise that as a very well-known brand, established over 35 years ago by Robert Waters himself, and he's still the CEO. There is around 3,700 employees of Rob Waters. I hope he doesn't mind us calling it Rob Waters, which pretty much everybody does, based in over 31 countries. And Rob Waters is renowned for offering a range of services that started off really in the financial sector, but covers IT and a range of other professional markets that also are delivering RPO services, obviously recruitment, staffing, and indeed some higher level recruitment oriented services. So Richard, welcome, and thank you for being on our panel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, let's go on to Iain Blair. Iain Blair's been in the recruitment market for a very long period of time, around 25 years, although I'm not sure he looks like that. When I say it, everyone's, yeah, right, but I'm saying it to you and having a second look. He obviously eats well. But the reality is Iain Blair's been in that recruitment market and really based in the technical arena. He came out of Computer People, of Best, and created Rethink with 3 others. Rethink was a business that grew very, very quickly, and in the end kind of got to a point of turning over about 140 million with 140 staff, which is a good ratio of billing, I would say, to good ratio of billing per member of staff, and actually went through some interesting scenarios where they seem to have tried most things. So they acquired, they listed on AIM, they took VC funding, but they also delisted. So business has been, with a lot of experience through most things that any of our members out there might want to experience themselves, but actually separated from that business in 2017, created a new brand and a new business, Revoco. Again, in that in the IT market, based in Bristol, which we've all agreed this morning already what a great place Bristol is, and actually provides a number of services based from normal recruitment, contract recruitment, but actually creating whole teams around startup businesses, as well as providing a newer service that I'm going to poke him and prod him on in this Question Time Live, which is recruitment as a service, a new innovation started up this year to provide customers with something different during lockdown. Iain, thank you for spending your time here. We know you're in the office. I'm suspecting that Richard's not in the office, and we'll talk about those kind of scenarios later on, but thank you for joining us, Iain.
You're welcome. It's good to be here.
Great. So we have Natalie Thomas, and a lot of you will know Natalie really well. It's just you may not see her face that often. Natalie is the senior legal advisor for APSCo and is in charge of running our legal helpline. And so we thought we should bring Natalie here, who's going to cover the whole remit of the queries that we're getting and that you might have now into that legal helpline to answer some of the questions that are still coming forward. The legal helpline, I hope this is right, Natalie, has quietened down in some ways from the peak of lockdown, but there's still a lot of calls, still a lot of things that members are querying, and you are dealing them with Raj and dealing with them very effectively. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Anne.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're welcome. Okay, then a face that's very well known to all of you out there is Sam Hurley, and that Sam Hurley is the operational director for APSCo. She's been in a board meeting with me this morning, which is a global board meeting. She sits on the APSCo global board representing APSCo UK, because I kind of have to have a different hat representing the whole of the rest of the other APSCos globally. So we've had a busy start to this morning already, Sam. But Sam has focused with Tanya, who can't be here this morning, focuses on one, doing all the work and I get all the glory, but as well as that, focuses on making sure that our lobbying piece is ahead of the game. And she'll know that only yesterday I was invited by Alex Sharma, who is the Secretary of State from a business point of view, to come in and have discussions with the government about Brexit and what we can do from a talent acquisition point of view, and what we're suggesting to help UK recruitment PLC to actually make inroads into that market. So Sam is going to cover some of the information that we get asked with regard to lobbying or the political landscape. So we have a full panel. Let me start off by asking our two guest panelists, Iain and Richard, and maybe Iain, I'm going to come to you first. Talk to me about Revoco. Where were you before lockdown? Where are you now, and how are you planning to move forward? Big question.
Okay, so we were just 3 years old before COVID struck, and we were on a very healthy upward curve. I was really pleased with how the business was going. We were overachieving our forecasts. We were up to about 15 staff, and I had a really healthy mix of kind of 360 recruiters, but also a team of delivery consultants that also delivered the work into some of our larger accounts. We had some managed service customers, or sort of mini RPO customers. And yeah, things were going extremely well. Since lockdown, I was explaining earlier, Anne, we were unfortunate enough to be hit very quickly. We do quite a large amount of work in the retail tech sector. So unfortunately, some of our customers, the likes of, Ted Baker, Monsoon, River Island, these guys, the minute the lockdown was announced and their stores were closed, they had to be very dramatic with their cost cutting. So we did have a big hit to our contract book, because that's predominantly where a lot of our contractors worked. And then obviously when the time was right, when we were told by Boris to go home, we all went home. Watched it all unravel, and the furlough scheme was a very, very welcome news indeed. I was desperately trying to keep hold of my team that I'd obviously spent the last 3 years building, and that furlough scheme was enabled us to do that. And we put pretty much the entire team, by myself and my partner, that carried on work. And then since lockdown, we've been doing lots of thinking, lots of strategizing, really kind of having a good look at who we were, what our proposition was, and what we thought the market would do coming out of this. And I know that you've probably got some questions to ask me on that later on. Generally speaking, we are probably circa 30% down, I'd say, from last year. But we are back now in the office, albeit social distancing. I'm lucky that I moved into our new office in August last year. So when everyone was talking about, we're not going back to the offices, I was like, I'd like to still come back to the one I've just developed. So we are back, and yeah, so far, so good. Good to be back.
Okay, great to have you back, pretty obviously. Richard, talk to me about Reward. It's obviously a huge business in a whole load of countries. Where were you before? Where do you think you are now? And some of those plans moving forward.
So I think, we had a very good year last year, although to be fair, there were some regulatory headwinds and some political headwinds. So for example, we've got some exposure in South America, which has had quite a lot of turmoil there, but also actually the demonstrations in Hong Kong were actually quite significant for us in that part of the world. So we needed COVID like a hole in the head, like the rest of the world. I think thinking about where we were and where we're at now, I think we were pleasantly surprised at how well we dealt with the crisis. I don't think it's time to be slapping each other on the back, but so far I think in the management team have probably never worked so closely together. And I think it also proved the concept that a hybrid of remote working and working in the office does work. I think Rob's view before all of this was working from home clearly doesn't work, but I don't think that's entirely the case. And it is more nuanced. And certainly, in support functions, a lot of it can be done remotely. However, having said that, though, we are trying to get back to normal. And I think part of that, particularly for the front office functions, is being back in the office. I think the challenge has really been in London as much as anything else. I think, if you look at the regions, the regional businesses actually quite stable now. People are coming back in. I think people feel comfortable and confident. And what we found is definitely, as much as we can focus on having a COVID secure office and reassuring people don't trust London transport. And it's not just us, it's our clients. So, you go into the office to have a conversation with the person on the next desk. Well, actually, they're not in there because you're running bubbles. Your clients aren't coming into the office. So I think it's made us reevaluate the way we work. And I hope at the end of this, we come up with a hybrid that is really effective. And luckily, Rob is, I think, allowing the MDs to have quite an open book on how we do that. Figures wise, we put out some half yearly figures. We're still in profit. We still did about 400 million for the first half. Clearly, some of that was in the good times. And we really kept our heads above water. But I've got to say, the government schemes around the world have really helped with that. And it's avoided having to make large-scale redundancies. It's avoided having to shut offices. So I know some of our competitors have pulled out of a couple of markets. So I very much hope we return to business as usual. I think, we're probably looking at halfway through next year, I think, before things start getting back to any sort of sense of normality. I think we'll come out of it stronger, I hope. Everyone will say that, of course, but I am a believer. So. Okay,
good. Iain, do you believe that Revoco will come out stronger? What do you think?
Yes, I do, 100%. We can only do what the market's allowing us to do, right? But we have definitely sharpened the sword. We've got a very, very clear proposition. We used the 3 or 4 months of in essence, downtime to really break through some of the projects that would have probably been on our list for a long time. So brand new, website, new propositions, you name it, were all done within that period of time. The market is doing very interesting things. I know we're very small, certainly compared to Robert Walters, but we are seeing a lot of perm activity. I haven't seen the contract activity yet that we were expecting, but no, we are quietly confident. We are quietly confident that we're going to come out of this even stronger.
It's interesting, isn't it? So I was at one of the APSCo sector group meetings, which was the IT sector group, and last week, and the mainstay of that was people were all discussing that perm in IT has really come back more than anyone would imagine. Are you finding that within the group, Richard, that perm has come back unexpectedly? Because I would have thought contract would have been the first to come back. Normally is, but it seems in the IT sector, I'd say in logistics, same scenario. Some of the other markets probably less so. What about you with IT, Richard? Are you seeing perm back?
Perm, I think it's definitely there's a trend that rather than consultancy, I think perm seems to be where businesses are really focusing, and I think that's probably because they've sat down and had a good think about what they need, and rather than filling roles and projects as they come along, they probably take a bit of time to think about it more strategically. In the same way, I think we have in our own business, but it's a real patchwork. So in Australia, for example, the perm market's actually been quite buoyant, and the temp market's been quite buoyant, but the perm market has not been so much. So I think it is also quite regional as well. But I would say the trend is perm over temp at the moment, just generally. The other thing I think which is important is where banks and other large institutions large corporates are making redundancies or considering redundancies, the last thing they're going to be doing is taking on large numbers of temporary workers. If, as much as anything else, I think it sends a really poor message and frustrates their processes. So, but contract isn't dead. I think it's just that's not where the focus is right now.
Okay. Richard, you said that you're fairly proud and pleased with the way that the group has handled the whole coronavirus scenario. What did you do to keep your staff engaged? And are any of the things that you've been doing during lockdown the things you're going to continue doing?
Let me talk about my own team. But I think one of the things that we've done as a management group is we would meet once a month. Now we meet every week. And I think that's a global call. And I think actually doing things over Teams puts everybody on the same level. So it's not Rob at one end of the boardroom table and the CFO at the other. So I think that's really helped. And I think that's really allowed a lot more open conversation. Adversity is the engine of change, and this is very much the case. So it's a catalyst, and things that might have been not considered as important are now much more important. It's been really important. In my own team, so I have 30 across the world in legal. We have a few empty vacancies because we've put a stall on hiring at the moment where people have left. But we've done. I think the communication again is really important. So we've been having a short 30-minute meeting once a week. We've been breaking off into groups. I think we've delegated more. I think that all helps morale. But in terms of practical stuff, I've been involving them in training. So we have access to some mini MBA courses. We've done mindfulness in the morning. We had mini golf on Friday. So we've been doing some off-site stuff. In terms of what we're going to do going forward, I think really working on this hybrid idea of thinking about how we sit and how we work together. Do we need to be in the office all the time? And actually showing a vision about what things can be like, which for us would probably be 3 days a week in, 2 days out, but making those 3 days in really count, really about FaceTime. There is no point somebody sitting at a desk talking to somebody that they otherwise would have sat next to on a phone or via Skype or Zoom. There's no point. What is really valuable is actually getting stuck in with the business. What's really valuable is going to people's desks and actually, when we don't have the social distancing, really being a bit more in people's faces, I would say. So we've learned a lot from it, but I think providing that clear vision of what the benefits that are going to come out of this is really important. That's what people buy into. I think the other thing very much is, just the communication. It's, that one-to-one time with people. I've set up a surgery time, which has been really successful. So we have an hour, 2 hour block once a week where anybody from the team can book a slot if they want to have a consult on something, they want to get my input. And that's worked really well too. So I'm actually spending more time with my people. So been a positive experience. I think I'm in my first week of not having the children about. I know, and you know a lot about children. You have quite a few of them running around. But I find the working from home now and just works much better when you're not dealing with a 4-year-old.
Yeah, mine are a little bit older than that, actually. I have to say, I have 7 girls, but they're a bit older than that. But actually, with my 16-year-old just having gone back to school, that's definitely value add. Although she hibernated for some months, I'm not sure she even noticed there was a lockdown. It's normal life for a 16-year-old, I think. But anyway, let's come on then to some of the questions that I've had. And Iain, I am going to ask you about Revoco in a minute, about how you've managed lockdown and what are you going to take from it moving forward. But let's get on to some of the issues that people are asking us. I've had, Natalie, this is one I think for you. I've had one of our educational members has asked, and you're on, just so that you know, you're on mute. Our client, a school, has informed us that they wish to engage one of our temps directly on a permanent basis, but they don't have to pay a fee. Is that correct?
So yes, that's been quite a popular issue that we've had on the help desk. We have quite a few members working and recruiting within the education sector. And the problem is with the fact that the schools were closed during lockdown, and that was for a number of months. And there are restrictions within the conduct regulations that place a limit on when you can charge transfer fees. So due to the big gap in school closures, a a lot of the assignments have ended past that 8-week time period. So unfortunately, a lot of the schools are taking advantage of that and are requesting transfers from temp to perm. And due to the fact that 8 weeks has lapsed since the end date of the assignment, excuse me, they're able to take those staff on free of charge. And that's not something that you can work around, unfortunately. The conduct regulations still remain binding law during this time. And when you are working with vulnerable adults or children, those candidates can't opt out of the conduct regulations, unfortunately. So it's an unintended consequence of the school closures, but unfortunately nothing can be done about that in terms of working around the restrictions.
Ouch, that's frustrating, isn't it? I have another question for you, Natalie, if that's okay. Can I still conduct remote to work checks? Right to work checks. Can I still, am I still able to conduct those remotely? Sorry, I'm faffing around with this question. Can I do that?
So short answer, yes. So on the 30th of March, the Home Office made some temporary changes to the way you conduct right to work checks. So they're called adjusted checks. So you can conduct that check over video call, whereas previously it needed to be done in person. And you can also use scanned copies instead of original documents. That measure is still in place. The Home Office hasn't announced when that will come to an end, but they will give clear notice of that. And we will, of course, communicate that to all of our members when that measure comes to an end. And there will be a requirement once the adjusted checks end for a retrospective check to be required within an 8-week period. So at the moment, yes, you can still do them remotely, but just to be cautious of when that comes to an end, there will be some action needed.
Do we have any view, Natalie, or maybe Sam, let me try Natalie first, as to when that's likely to come to an end? Have we had any feedback?
Not that I'm aware of. I checked the government website yesterday, and it still was on the same work lines of we will give you clear notice of when that comes to end. I don't know if Sam's got any insight there.
Okay, Sam, can I come to you? Do you have anything that gives us a view that when that might come to an end?
I don't in terms of when it might come to an end, but what we are hoping is that actually it'll become a more permanent change. So there is lobbying going on to the Home Office to talk about the possibility of that becoming a more permanent change.
Okay, then let me come on to you if that's right. We've got some questions about something that we've sent emails to our members about, and also it's been in the bulletin, and that's about the government Kickstart scheme. And I know that APSCo are creating an opportunity for members to be involved in that. Can you just outline briefly what is the Kickstart scheme and what are we doing to help our members?
Okay, so very briefly, the Kickstart scheme is, during this period, obviously unemployment's rising. A lot of that unemployment has been amongst young people. And so this new scheme the government's put in place is to try and stop those young people, 16 to 24-year-olds particularly to start with, stop them ending up as being long-term unemployed. So if you have new roles, if you can create new roles for a 6-month placement, it's through the Department for Work and Pensions. They will provide you with 16 to 24-year-old candidates that you can take on for a 6-month placement. It could go on longer, the government will fund 25 hours of that at national minimum wage. And that's going on from, it's starting now. The catch is you have to have 30 new roles to be able to apply for the scheme, which is why APSCo is applying on behalf of all of our membership, because clearly very few of our members have the opportunity to create 30 new roles at the moment. So we're applying on behalf of all our members. So that will start from the government suggesting around November, first placements, through to the end of December next year to start with, and it might potentially continue beyond that.
Sorry about that. So there's a real opportunity to bring, I always like the term, but I'm never allowed to say it generally or write it down, that sort of fresh meat really into the recruitment market. Does it suggest then that we can also help any diversity inclusion policies that our members have to start bringing in a broader range of people?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think this speaks really, really well to your equality, diversity and inclusion policy, and it's something that APSCo is working on to support our members much more on next year. But definitely from a social mobility point of view, I think we are talking about, you will get a range of CVs. I think they're coming via the job centre. There are a few things that aren't quite clear yet from the guidance we've got so far. But you'll get a range of CVs. It could be from a school leaver at 16 who hasn't been able to find a role, or it could be somebody that's already been in the job market for a while, up to 24, who's had a couple of jobs previously. So you're going to get a range of skills from the CVs that you get, a range of ages, but it will be from your local area. So you'll be pulling from candidate pools that your business might not have looked at before. Potentially you've been looking at the graduate level entries before for resourcer or marketing type roles, whatever. The roles I've had through from members so far are mainly around resources, CV admin, marketing, training, quite a few training recruiter roles, consultant roles as well. But yeah, absolutely. I think this is a real opportunity. What the government's trying to do is bring these young people back into a work environment and give them an opportunity to learn some of the basic skills. So they, you might be lucky, but you won't necessarily be looking at fully formed employees. You are expected as part of this scheme to give them some training, to teach them some of the basics, to teach them certainly CV writing and interview skills, which I felt our members were particularly well placed to provide.
And what are APSCo doing, apart from making sure we reach 30 so that our members can be included in this? First of all, are we confident we're going to get to 30?
I'm so excited about this. I'm really, really confident. We're at, we put the one email out to our membership on, what was it, Thursday, I think, last week, or Friday. And we're already at 27 roles. And I've got another 15 to 20 members that have expressed an interest that I haven't managed to speak to yet. So I've got all of those planned out. So yeah, I think we're going to get to the 30 roles, which is fantastic. So we will be able to do it for our members. And yeah, as well as applying on behalf of the membership so they can actually access this funding, we're also going to be providing a heavily discounted training package for those young people that they do take into their business. So if you're taking someone into your business, you want to give them, that introduction to the recruitment sector, or some basic, maybe the first line into recruitment training that we give. And then if you decide to keep them maybe beyond the 6-month placements, which I'm really hoping a lot of our members will, we will put together a package of discounted training for those individuals for you as a member.
Great. I'm sure we'll put something in to welcome into the recruitment market as a free of charge. I feel confident that APSCo will do that. But it sounds interesting, doesn't it? Let me come to you, Iain. So you've got, 14 members of staff now, or 14, 15 you've had before, whatever the number is now, hopefully similar. Do you feel that historically we've been fishing in the same sort of pond for a long time to bring in new people in the recruitment market? Are we looking for graduates without much experience, or preferably they've worked in some sales job and we can train them? Or have you been more open about what background people come from? Are you likely to be even more open?
Yeah, I'd like to think I've always been open in all the years that I've been hiring. I think I've always looked for certainly for trainee consultants. You always look for that hunger and that drive, and it really doesn't matter whether they've been to uni or not, or what their family background is. In fact, often, dare I say it, a broken family or a slightly less privileged background is preferred, quite frankly, because they have more drive. So I don't think I've changed my views on that. I've got a real range. My team at the moment, I've got one of my leaders was a straight out of school and a scaffolder at 16, and then got into recruitment. And I've got others that obviously have got a very good degree from a red brick university. So I have a real mix. Don't think my views have changed on that. I think the Kickstarter program sounds great. I think if I was in a position of slightly higher growth projections, I would definitely want to take advantage of that. For us, we're just not at that point yet. But so I don't know if that answers your question. But I don't think my views have really changed in recent months.
Okay, no, it does answer the question. Richard, let me come to you. I personally have a vision of a Rob Waters consultant, and I don't know if my vision is caught in a time warp or was always wrong, but it feels like it's that kind of smart, able, graduate, well-spoken, in a decent suit kind of chap. And I'm saying chap, okay? Am I out of date on that? Is there a different profile? Or do you feel there's an opportunity to create a different profile?
So I'll start with a little story. I was walking home from dropping my kids at school yesterday, and with my wife, and a chap got out of a car, very smart suit, very tailored, and I was thinking, and my wife said it, he could just wear a T-shirt that said, "I'm an estate agent." So there's an element, I think, of if Foxton's created recruitment agencies in a way, and I'm being self-critical of us. I think the problem that we've had is that there is that image of that smartly dressed, maybe Tim Lewin rather than Savile Row when they first start out, but probably aspirational for a huntsman. But I think when you're in the company, I think that it is a meritocracy, and actually don't be fooled by the fact that there's a British part of the group, but actually a lot of our leaders in Asia, for example, are from the local community, and we've really needed to grow local talent. I do think, though, we're a victim slightly, although that doesn't excuse us. We've recruited a lot from industry, and the industries we cover, like law and accountancy, traditionally, although it is changing, traditionally they have taken people like themselves, like partners like themselves. When I was a trainee solicitor back in 2000, we had nobody from an ethnic minority at all as a trainee, and it was a very large firm. It was an international firm. So I think that is changing, and I think hopefully we see a knock-on of people coming in from different backgrounds who probably wouldn't have looked as before. But I think also, I think in a way there's a difference in London and the regions. The regions have probably been more open. It's something that I think it's something we need to be more conscious about. I don't think we would actively say you've gone to the right school, or you're wearing the right clothes, or you look the right way makes a good consultant, actually. And I think there is an element of you need the hunger. I think, if you've got someone who has had it all their own way, I'm not sure how well they're necessarily suited to a sales type role or consultancy type role, where they're going to get pushback, where they're going to get constant adversity. So I think it's beneficial. I think the other thing in my team, we've made a real effort to get diverse backgrounds in there. And I think that really helps. And one of the things that when I talk about diversity, it's not just about race, color, background. It's actually about diversity of thought. And that is absolutely key. And one of the things that I've really learned from lockdown has been to ask my very junior members of staff, the trainees, we've got 3 trainees at the moment, what their views are, because they have a fresh opinion. And I think if the business doesn't graft onto that, then I think we miss out. It's not that you fail, you just miss out. So one of the things that we are doing is actually going out to our business. We've engaged Pern Cardona, an international diversity consultancy and inclusion. And we're really looking at this internally and asking the questions that need to be asked. And it's not just about diversity and inclusion, it's also about belonging. I know that sounds a bit wishy-washy, but it's about bringing people in and then feeling part of the team as well. And you can only really do that if you're conscious that you want to make change. So and you know, your description of the Robert Waters stereotype, to an extent, there is something to that. By the way, I'm quite in favour of people wearing nice, smart clothes at work. You know, you can't get away with a TM Lewin shirt forever. At some point, you need to upgrade.
What do you think, though, that the working from home that most of us have been doing how will that affect when we've got used to wearing, maybe it's some kind of shirt or a top, but actually with tracky bottoms on the bottom? How do you think that's going to affect in a background of business dress becoming more relaxed? I mean, the reality is wearing a tie starts looking really dated, well, even in client meeting scenario.
I think ties are ridiculous.
That this has had on business dress moving forward for the recruitment market. Richard.
So it's really interesting. So this is the first shirt that I put on for several weeks. I had to get it out of a suitcase. I tend to just wear t-shirts nowadays. And I think as time's gone on, even when I have my ball calls, I'm just wearing a plain t-shirt. Yeah, look, I think people should be themselves. I don't think wearing a suit and tie, I'm jesting a bit before, makes you better at your job. But we have a brand image, and I think it's important. A tie, of course, is a ridiculous thing because it comes from a ruff. In Tudor times, it was to keep the smell in. So a tie, if you think about it, serves very little purpose at all. But I do think, you know, in the end of the day, we need to move to a position, and it's part of being able to express yourself, but in a way that fits, I think, with what your company stands for. I think, you know, look, it will change. I think along with working from home, along with it's okay to take breaks in the day, it's okay to be drinking out of a Moomin mug and no one's going to judge you for it. I think things are changing, all for the better. And all of this is a catalyst for, I think, what was happening anyway. So there we go. Don't buy shares in TM Lewin.
No, or whatever happened to Tyrac? I was more of a Duchamp girl on the men that I know, I might say, but I wouldn't be buying shares in a Duchamp company now. Then let's get on. If we've talked about this diversity piece and actually this Kickstart stuff helping us, do you feel, Iain, that you have, as a recruitment organisation, do you have a role, do us as a profession have a role in pushing the diversity agenda to our client base? Because we're saying we take it seriously, or we don't even notice because we're so good at it. Do we have a role to play to be a catalyst for change in the world of employment?
Wow, there's a question. Look, I think we have to be realistic about what we can and can't do. I think if we are, you know, a recruitment partner to a client on a PSL, you know, how much can you do other than doing what we should be doing anyway in terms of sourcing and screening and having no bias whatsoever? Clearly, the more you move up the food chain, if you're then running an RPO or an MSP or even a kind of total talent gig with an organization, then you're going to be much more accountable for driving that agenda with them. So I guess the short answer is, where we can, we should positively influence. And I'm sure as recruiters, we've all had those dreaded moments of when a hiring manager has said something really inappropriate about they're looking for a man or a woman or whatever. You know, we've all been there and kind of had that look on our faces. Luckily, I haven't had that for a very long time, I should mention. So I think we can do what we can do, Anne, but I don't think we can do a lot more than we probably already are.
Okay, let's come on to Sam. I'm going to ask you, Sam, because the questions come in. Do I need to prepare my business for actual Brexit rather than transitional Brexit? Do I need to prepare my business for January moving forward? And if so, what are the kind of things I need to be doing?
I think the short answer is yes, probably. I think a lot of our members were looking at this last year and during the transition period, and obviously what's happened this year, that it's kind of taken a back seat. And I think now it's suddenly just coming up again as an issue. I think there are you definitely need to be looking at your business, you need to be looking at your supply chain, you need to be looking at your end clients, and the type of staff that they're looking for and where you used to get those staff. I think we are really interested in understanding whether the skills gap that has been talked about that is going to arrive because of Brexit and after the transition period, whether that actually is going to happen or not. So we're really interested in hearing from members who have got those skills gaps appearing and don't have the candidate base listed, or feel that candidate base is going to be much more difficult to get hold of because of the immigration system post transition. So I think I would say, because I've read it thoroughly, we've got some excellent guidance on this that Tanya and her team wrote, Tanya, Natalie and the team wrote, which is well worth reading. If you're sitting there in a recruitment business now as a member thinking, oh my God, what should I be doing about Brexit? Go and read that document, because it will point you in all the right directions. But there's too much to talk through all of it now, but as a wide idea, I would say you need to be looking not just at your business. I mean, it depends whether you're a UK only business or in an international business, of course, but you need to be looking at your wider supply chain, what your client requirements are likely to be moving forward as far as you can, and understand whether you're likely to have those skills gaps, or whether your people are coming from the EU and they're going to be more difficult to get hold of into the UK. It also makes you start to have conversation or think about yourselves about whether there are other things you should be doing with the candidate base that you currently have in the UK, and whether you need to be developing that as well.
Okay, Richard, because you're a global business, I'm going to ask you, and I hope it's okay to ask, what are the kind of preparations that you as Rob Waters as a business have done to make sure that you're Brexit prepared?
We're in a good place, but that's partly through the way we were structured from a regulatory point of view. So we've always had local licenses and local separated businesses. I think the other advantage that we do have is that if there is a downslide in work in the UK, that we have, we're essentially hedged in places like the Netherlands and France. I think what's frightening for us, certainly concerns me, is the lack of preparation that some of the larger clients have. They're just not really thinking about it. I think they would have been, but at the beginning of the year, we obviously had preparations for the IR35 changes that got delayed, and then we had COVID. And I think now we're into a point where a lot of people think about restructuring and lessons learned from COVID. And I think it's only in the last few weeks, as a no deal becomes more likely than not, in my view. I hope not. I hope it's just posturing, that I think businesses are starting to wake up to it. So we haven't quite seen that through. I think we're going to have some of the same issues as everybody else, in terms of our own employees and making sure that they're getting things registered, but that's relatively simple. What we are seeing, just in a wider piece, and I don't know whether this is foreshadowing what could happen in the UK, is certainly in some of the Asian markets have become very nationalistic. Singapore in particular is really now don't hire foreigners, hire locals. And I think it is entirely possible we might start to see that in the UK after Brexit, particularly if you've also got COVID. I hope that's not the case. What possibly might come in, and I think this is probably the most likely scenario, is closer ties again with Australia and South Africa, making talent from those markets coming into the UK. That's probably a fairly likely scenario. But I hope we don't get to a point where we become really isolationist. I think it's very difficult to make plans where things are so up in the air at the moment. I know that's probably not the all singing, all dancing answer, but it's the honest one. I think until we know quite what standards our clients will be expecting of us, it's very difficult except to try and second guess where it's going to be. But as I said, I think we're lucky, fortuitous, that we licensed on a local basis. I think thinking about for other companies that aren't set up in that way, I think it could start to become more difficult, particularly if you're supplying into Europe or Europe is supplying into the UK, if you're not set up from a licensing perspective. Some of the European, from a former life, I know that they can be quite protectionist when they want to be. Recruitment, Europe, as you know, is sometimes very funny about things like temp market. The law is very different over there. So I could see this being an area which could be problematic unless you actually got a base within some of those European countries and you're locally registered.
Yeah. Sam, because we have this discussion coming up with Alex Sharma about Brexit and what should happen out there in the talent sector, what do you think the few things are that we are going to focus on in that roundtable discussion?
I think the immigration system after the transition period is obviously a key one. So ensuring currently the system they put forward doesn't give enough protection to those highly paid, highly skilled contractors that our members rely on for their own clients. So I think that's an important one. I think also, the meeting is about looking at a reduction in friction within the labour market, or the talent market as they call it. And I think, so looking at the agency workers regulations, looking at the conduct regs particularly, which are in desperate need of updating or at least shaving down, at least getting rid of some of the more onerous and less useful parts of the legislation.
Okay. So I always give this piece of advice if anyone's expanding into Europe, and it's something that I stole from John Nerthen from the Staffing Industry Analyst, that we should only open a professional recruitment business based in Europe when we are dealing purely with the beer drinking part of Europe, and we should leave alone the wine drinking areas of Europe. And actually, as a rule of thumb, it makes perfect sense. And certainly with temp legislation, why go to France, really? Why go to Spain? It's just not the place that, they're not the places that are easy to work in. It would be interesting to see if it becomes even more difficult as we get beyond the transitional phase. Natalie, I'm going to come to you and ask I've got a question here, which is quite a small one, but I want to really set that against, what are the questions that you are getting from APSCo members on the legal helpline at the moment? What is the focus? Are they still worried about the end of the furlough scheme?
Yes, some members are, and I think whilst it was a very welcome measure and it did help to retain a lot of staff, I think for some businesses, depending on where they are at, they are still looking at a wave of redundancies at the end of the scheme. So yes, that is something definitely which pops up a lot, furloughing, the changing of the rules, obviously with the tapering off of the contributions over this month and finally in October, but redundancies are still quite popular.
Yeah, and the question I've got is, do employees still need to be furloughed for at least 3 weeks in order to claim under the job retention scheme as it is now?
So no, that was a rule which was first in place when the job retention scheme was initiated. So once it was extended from the 1st of July, the minimum claim period is now 7 days rather than 3 weeks.
Okay, sorry, I think you can hear me, but for the life of me, sorry, something went wrong then. Okay, so there is that change. And are you finding that APSCo members are going to utilise the £1,000 per employee if anyone who has been furloughed is still employed in January? Is that going to be an incentive to keep people on to January, or not really?
I would say more no than yes. I think people aren't able to see that far forward at this stage. I think whilst there is a lot of future planning and, looking forward to the new normal, as they say, I think January is still quite a way away, and there is obviously still a number of months after the end of the furlough scheme before you reach that January cut-off to see whether people are able to retain that workforce until then.
Okay, thank you for that. Iain, I'm going to come to you. We talked about innovation, and I've got a strong view that everyone does need to innovate their way out of a crisis, really. You've set up a new service, which is called Recruitment as a Service. What is that? And is it working? Is it something that's making money?
So it is a subscription-based model. So obviously the world's gone subscription mad, hasn't it? The way we watch television, the way we watch download music, and even now Pret's gone down the subscription model. I don't know if you've seen that. You can become a subscriber of coffee. We've been talking about it for a long time, and to be honest, I sold a solution like this probably 10 years ago. I think it fills a gap between your on-demand agency model of recruitment and your full-on RPO outsource model. So we felt that with businesses going through the turmoil that they were and cutting costs that they were, it's very likely that internal talent teams were going to be shrunk, if not got rid of. And when we come out of this, and when we come out the other side, like we're seeing, clients will still need to hire. So we wanted to create a model that kind of slotted into that gap. So it is a monthly fee. It's not a rent-a-recruiter. That's been around for years. It is a solution where we come in, embed our knowledge and our understanding into a customer, help them build out their talent strategies, which include, their branding, their employer value proposition, their candidate journey, the whole piece. But we also fill their jobs, but we don't fill them on a per placement. They are paying a subscription-based model, but it's a minimum term of 6 months. So there does need to be some commitment there, clearly. Is it working? I've had some really interesting conversations with clients. It's definitely of interest, and it's piqued an interest. So I'm very confident in it. It's a little early to say. We only launched it 6 weeks ago. But I'm enjoying the conversation because it is about risk and reward ultimately. Can a client see what they're trying to achieve, and do they understand what they're trying to achieve? So yeah, we're aiming our subscription model at sort of startups and scale-ups, which obviously there are lots and lots of them that need to get perhaps before Series A funding. They suddenly need to ramp up. So yeah, that's what we've just launched our RAS offering.
I think it's a good idea to innovate. In innovating that to startups and ramp-ups, pretty obviously ramp-ups you're probably in contact with already, but you've got a new service, and for the startups, a new client base. Is it too many changes at once? Or do you think this is going to be a long-term goer or a short-term win?
No, I think it's a long-term goer. Every single tech entrepreneur I've ever met already doesn't like the pay-as-you-play agency model. They're too clever for that. They're thinking, why would I give you £18,000 for a senior software engineer? They're already thinking, I need to challenge this sort of status quo. So even the startups, I think if they have the need, a startup journey, typically they hire their people they know, they hire their friends, their network, but they very quickly run out of that network. And that's when we strike to come in and help them on that next chapter. So no, I think this is long term, and I personally think that recruitment businesses have to offer not just a range of services, but a range of different commercial options to appeal to today's customer.
It does seem totally crazy to me that, having been in the recruitment market for 30 odd years, that actually our billing mechanism in the mainstay has stayed the same, and yet everything else has been changing around. There's no question there's other services in there, but we pretty much tried to maintain that delivery and payment on delivery, which seems interesting. We're coming towards the end of our discussion. Richard, what are you doing at Robert Walters that is innovative? You mentioned that adversity is the engine of change. What's changing at Robert Walters moving forward?
If I told you, I'd have to kill you. No, it's not that. It's not that secret. We're certainly overhauling our tech systems. and really looking properly at our tech pipeline. So I think this is really important because we do have an innovation department. And innovation is not just the technology, but it's actually the systems and processes that go around it. I mean, the biggest change has been actually being able to stop running at 50,000 miles an hour and say, actually, hold on a minute, what are we doing? And having a strategy behind it. And that's probably the biggest change. The point is this: there's a lot of technologies out there. Everybody tries them out, but actually now having some structure about what it is we need, and starting with the point of what's the customer prepared to pay for, what's going to generate as revenue, rather than this is a fantastic idea and really cool and it's come out the West Coast and everybody loves it. With all the my phone rings and I think, oh God, there's a data issue. But I think that's one of the things that's going to be a big change for us, and certainly replacing our internal systems. In terms of the RPO side of the business, MSP side of the business, consulting and SOW is definitely something that we're dipping our toe into the water on. Can't say too much about that, and certainly we've also thought about things like subscription models as well. There's a really good point though that you make, Anne, which is in common with a lot of other industries, accountancy and law, the billing, the way, the commercialization of our services hasn't really changed very much, and it kind of suited us, but it's actually quite risked up as well. And I think that's one of the things that the business probably, the industry probably has to be aware of, that in times, particularly if you're running a startup organization, you've got a lot of overheads to start with. Hopefully working from home may decrease those, but if there's a cutoff of jobs, you've really got an issue. It's a bit like restaurants, you've got overheads but nothing's coming in. And so I think we do need to think about models that protect us as an industry quite a lot better. And I think we also need to think about mechanisms around the cash flow when we have a big temp book. Again, we're not out the woods yet. I think we have to be thinking very carefully about our clients when we're on 60-day payment terms. And we need to address those things. They're the things that worry me. And of all the regulatory headaches that I have, the stuff that really worries me is about a big bank or a big client. And this affects you even if you're a small business, because you'll be fishing in the same pond, going under. And having a big temp liability, particularly if things are tight. It sounds though, Iain, that you're doing a lot of innovation stuff, and I think that's the advantage of being in a small business. You can be more agile, but I'd say one of the things that we are taking away is a iterative approach, and trying things out, and if it doesn't work, moving on.
Okay, let me bring this session to a close. To be honest, I've got loads more questions I would love to be asking people, but the time's gone crazy quickly. So what I would say is this, in summing up, that it sounds to me like there's definitely been an opportunity in COVID. If you're still in business, it's the time to look at your business. It's the time to reorganize your business. It's time to look at new divisions, new opportunities, not wander blithely into those, but look at what problems we are trying to solve on behalf of our customers and how they are changing. Have a good look at those, what problems we're trying to solve with our business in the way they've been organized up until now, and look for alternative ways of doing things. It's interesting with our pricing model. I think, Richard, as you said, we've had the same model all this time and it's worked for us. I'm not sure it's worked for us for a little while, where 80% of the work that we do is really only giving us 20% of the revenue that we deserve. And that maybe, the clients have been saying when they do get a big bill in, they're shocked because they don't recognize the work that's happened before the placement. So maybe it's time for all of us in the recruitment market to look at a different methodology of how we charge for our services and make sure we value our services properly, and that we're proud of being in this amazing profession that's given us all opportunities to serve our client base, our candidate base, and actually opportunities to be a catalyst for change in what the world of work looks like and what staff in our client organisations and our own look like? I want to thank Richard Harris for giving us some real insights into that business, and he took my little pop at Rob Waters of looking pretty similar very well, and there are changes obviously afoot there. Thank you very much for giving your time. I also want to thank Iain Blair, who has an agile business. I'm not going to say small, that's £11 million worth of turnover. That sounds like a pretty groovy business to me. As an agile business, giving us some insights to what they are doing, and I'm hoping that that will be really useful to our members. I want to thank Natalie Thomas, who has been working so hard with Raj on the legal helpline. You have no idea how busy that has been, and is a real expert. Some new qualifications that she's also achieved recently from the legal point of view, taking her up a rung. So congratulations to Natalie, and thank you for working so hard and being with us today. And to Sam Hurley, who is our Ops Director at APSCo. Thank you to everybody here. Sorry it's gone so quickly. Look for the next one of these coming up really soon, and thank you again for tuning in. Take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.